Tim, we had you on some time ago, introduced you as a Transport Canada certified drone pilot, one of few in this area. You maybe the only one on the island right now, or
No,
is there a bunch?
I don't know precisely how many there are. I was aware of how many competitors I had in the real estate space, which was 3 or 4.
Okay.
And now we're going to be talking about mapping, and I'm not sure I really have any competitors in that area.
This is a fairly new development in the drone world, is it?
Yes, it is. What mapping is, if you can picture a satellite photo in Google Maps, and I think everybody's done this, I'll look at my house, and then they find that their house hasn't even been built yet on Google Maps because they only update their maps, every few years. Also, the photos that you see on Google Maps are very low resolution. Now, there's a number of industries that want high resolution maps overlaid on a Google map so you can see the before and the after. Mapping can also be used for environmental studies. And if I can just give you an example of a mapping mission I recently did out in Bamfield, we had an environmental consulting company studying the viability of an LNG plant out in Bamfield, which may or may not come. But in order to approve such a project, studies have to be done on the marine life in the low tidal flats. So I went out there when the tides were at their lowest this year, and I was with a bunch of scientists, biologists, geologists who are all just studying down there. It was quite interesting to be among a bunch of smart people. And my job was to fly over a fairly large area at low tide so that you can see high-resolution maps of the weeds, of the rock formations, of everything like that. And then that combined with the data that the scientists are collecting provides a kind of a very complete picture of the health of the area before an LNG plant goes in.
So before this capability came along with drones, you'd actually have to have people out on their feet somehow surveying this area and whatever wildlife lived on it?
Well, yeah, and we do have the people on their feet studying. Like they had all the survey equipment, and they were dividing the low tidal flats into sectors, and they're studying it by 1.5 feet and 1.5 feet square, one by one, and measuring it with this survey equipment. But they also wanted a sort of a more general overhead view of what's going on, and that was where I came in.
Huh.
Yeah.
Explain, if you will, just how the process works, how what you do to set a drone off mapping.
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, first of all, in order to make sure that the data that is collected by the drone is accurate, I put out things called ground control points, which I've made out of 3 by 3 foot chloroplast sheets, and they have 4 quadrants on them, a black and a black and a white and a white, and the very center is the center. And then we go out there with very precise, very expensive GPS tools, and we put it right in the middle of that target, and then we know what its exact GPS location is. And then when the drone takes off, it has also got GPS brains in it, but less accurate. So the drone then is operated by launching an app on my iPad. I define the area that I want to fly over on the app, and then I just hit go, and the drone will take off, and it'll fly that pattern, which is a crisscross pattern. And it's quite interesting because you can see on the iPad, you can see that it's actually following that precise line. It's taking a picture every minute or so. And then when it comes back, it'll have 150, 200, 300, 500 photos, depending on how big the area is. And then I upload it to a service, a mapping service. There's quite a few out there. There's Drone Deploy or Pix4D. The one I use is called Maps Made Easy. And I upload these photos to a supercomputer, really, and it stitches together those individual photos into one great big large photo.
Okay. If you're just joining in, I was speaking with a drone pilot, Transport Canada certified he is, Tim Alex. We're talking about drone mapping. So far, it seems, and you've explained it to me, this is primarily, it has industrial applications. Do you foresee more civilian, so to speak, applications possibly?
I don't really see it for civilians, but I do see why industry would be interested in it. Having a drone in the air costs very little. except for the pilot. I mean, he's going to charge for his skill, but the actual cost of running aircraft is almost nothing, right? It runs on batteries. You charge your batteries. I have 4 batteries. It might have cost me $2 to run that mission. Now, if you were to compare that to a real aircraft, and the industries have been using mapping, but they've had to use real helicopters and real aircraft to get the same photogrammetry. That's the actual term, photogrammetry. Okay. But now, because of the miniaturization of all the electronics and cameras, the same thing can be achieved with an inexpensive drone. Huh. And I don't really see it happening in the private sector so much, but I can certainly see why the agricultural sector or the construction sector or the mining sector could really take advantage of the data that can be so easily obtained with a drone.
Okay. Now, you sent me one file that was, you explained that it was made up of simply from still shots from the drone, the camera pointed straight down,
yes,
taking a picture every second or so, and it goes into some computer and it came out as a 3D file that you could then explore and manipulate.
Yes, that's the other thing that I find really interesting. So far, I haven't found a customer who wants the 3D map.
It's really cool.
Yeah, and the trip I just did to Banfield, they were only interested in the 2D mapping. But the 3D mapping is really cool because now you can scroll around, zoom in and out. It looks like you're actually flying over the property just by using your mouse. And for topographical features, like, for example, let's say you are a landscape supply company and you have piles of dirt everywhere or piles of something or other, bark mulch. I can fly over that area and it'll stitch together a 3D map, and then using trigonometry, I guess, the software program can actually measure the size of that stockpile to very high accuracy. Oh. And normally you would need a couple of guys on the ground with their survey equipment. It might take an hour or two. The drone, it'll take 10 or 15 minutes. Yeah. So there's a big cost savings and a big time savings there.
And that could have a trickle-down effect to the public at some point or another. You mentioned also for its use in farming and its use in inspecting large or tall objects.
Right. Well, farming is a really interesting one because farmers need to quickly get an idea of how well their crops are doing. And with really large farms, with multiple hectares of farmland, it takes a long time to go over that manually, and it costs a lot of money to fly over it with a plane. With a drone, you could fly over it in 20, 30 minutes, an hour or two, constantly changing out the batteries depending on how big the area is. And then using multispectral cameras, which measure light waves, you can get a really precise idea of how healthy the crop is and which areas of the crop need attention. And again, this is really huge with agriculture. They're maybe one of the biggest industries using the drones.
And then in South America, drones using LiDAR finding ancient ruins.
Yeah, I haven't actually seen the movie yet, but there's one called Lost Treasures of the Maya Snake Kings, and it's a National Geographic documentary, and they used a drone carrying LiDAR. And what LiDAR is, it's short for light detection and ranging, and it can peer through a tree canopy. So with normal cameras, you wouldn't see what's underneath the trees or the growth, but LiDAR will actually see the ground underneath and create a 3D map. And people have been telling me about this documentary, and that they've just discovered great swaths of man-made objects and buildings that were previously unknown because it had all been grown under. But with a drone carrying a LiDAR camera, it all came to vivid life, and you can see quite clearly that there was streets and cities and canals and all kinds of things that nobody knew about before flying over it with a drone. Yeah.
That's one of the more glamorous applications, I suppose. But otherwise, it's an exciting developing world, this whole drone thing.
It's very exciting, and I'm so glad that I got in the industry early, and that I decided to qualify myself by getting my Transport Canada certification, because that opens up a lot of opportunities for me and for others as well.
And I bet we have to wrap it up here, but I'm thinking also, just for fun, you mentioned the last time we spoke of using the drone to follow, I believe, a windsurfer. And I'm just thinking of being able to see that kind of video. Must be a great joy.
Oh, it sure is. I love doing the action stuff. That's where you really have to have the skill. And, I used to fly RC aircraft, and I've learned how to do aerobatics and everything else. It actually kind of worked against me in one way, is that aerobatic, you're throwing the aircraft around. And when you're doing cinematic stuff, you have to be really smooth. But circling around a ship, let's say, that's moving at 10 knots, and you want to orbit around it, you have to fly forwards, and then as you circle around the side, you have to fly sideways, and then as you get to the front, you have to fly backwards, and then you come to the other side, and you're flying sideways the other way, and to get all that smoothly onto a shot, and when I do nail it, it's very exciting, and I get a little thrill every time I do that.
That's cool. Wait, you found a fun line of work from the sound of it. We have to wrap it up here. Tim Alex talking about drones and one of the new things, drone mapping. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Dave.
It's 8:57.